good guest, CENK UYGUR. Hello, CENK. How are you doing? I think you're above introductions. Most people know exactly who you are. You're one of the people who have pioneered online politics with TYT, and we're very excited to have you on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Happy to be on. And I like that non-introduction. It's it's an interesting form of respect. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. As people know, you're famous for saying "of course," which is another thing. I just want to point out that one of the things we really strive for is good faith and helpfulness in conversation. And while we're going to have disagreements, and that's an important part of being in society, the most important thing is to be able to talk through those disagreements in a way that's not trying to get a gotcha. It's not trying to insult people. It's really here to just talk about your opinions, your news, and just have a good conversation. I hope you understand that, and everyone here respects that. That's like the main idea of this entire podcast, is to have good conversations.
I instantly don't accept it. I demand bad faith.
Oh, okay, fine.
And I will exercise it throughout. No, look, seriously, I totally appreciate that. And there is a lot of bad faith out there. So yes, honest opinions, let's exchange them. Love it.
Amazing. One of the things, and I hope you don't take offense, when I had a conversation with Cornel West and I spoke with him, we spoke about his run for president, and the reality is that his chances of winning are very low, or from the get-go, and yours were as well. Overall, I mean, it's shocked, right?
I didn't see that coming.
Did you really think, like, what were your thoughts that, like, how much did you actually think you were actually going to get to the main stage and have a debate, and like what were your aims in this entire run to begin with?
Yeah. So first of all, there's two things that I'm always amused that people don't realize, right? When people are like, "Oh, dude, man, you're not gonna win." Like, yeah, I know that it's not overly likely. Yes, I'm very aware of that, right? So it's that fact did not escape me. So, but thank you for reminding me. I would say to the average person who writes that in, or the average troll that writes that in. The second one is, dude, you didn't even read the Constitution, man. It says you have to be born here. Like, yeah, no, I know. I read it. You don't know anything about constitutional law. Okay, but fine. So we can get into that later if you like. But so why did I do it if I know the chances are very, very low? And I would say that when I first got in, the chances were somewhere between 1% to 2%, which and so you could say that that's way too high, and we could talk that through, right? But I thought if you got a 1% to 2% chance of changing the world, you almost have a responsibility to try. Okay, now let me explain why I thought it was that high, right? To give you a sense of perspective on what's possible and not possible. The reason is, so I'm a naturalized citizen, and so that most people think, oh, you're not qualified to run because of the Constitution and the thing that I was just joking about. But the reality is that according to 14th Amendment jurisprudence, there's actually a good chance that I would win a case like that, and I'm in the middle of a case like that. And so that sounds like a giant hurdle, and it is, and that lowers your chances significantly. Hopefully, otherwise, it would be a little bit higher than that. But what it also does was it provides an opportunity for you to pull off a miracle, or what's perceived as a miracle, when in reality that 14th Amendment case is about 50-50, if you ask me. And I know others disagree and have it at different percentages. So if I had won that case, or if I win that case going forward, then all of a sudden it changes the entire dynamic of the race, because here's a guy they said doesn't have a chance, but just pulled off what appears to be a miracle and has put himself in the game, right? And then, and people thought I would start at 0% in the polls, because they're like, you're not a politician, and you're an online talk show host, and whenever we see you, you're yelling. You got no chance at all, man, right? So, but Quinnipiac put me in a poll, and I was at 2%. Again, is 2% a giant number? Of course not, guys. Of course not, right? But that at the time, it was beating 2 Republican governors, and it was on the board. It was on the board in a way that people did not expect at all. So if you take that, and if they had kept putting me in polls, and I got on media, and I won the case, there's your slight avenue for a Luke Skywalker shot into the Death Star.
So right? you know something, I might as well go and buy the lottery ticket. If I have a 2% chance, who would not buy a lottery ticket at 2% chance?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, think about it, right? If you buy a lottery ticket, you have a point oh 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 whatever
But if I had
1%
a two
chance.
percent chance, I would buy it. Would you? I
Yeah.
mean, who wouldn't buy
At
a
a
lottery ticket?
2% chance at a
Out of
lottery
50.
ticket, if you're gonna win $100 million, what are you, nuts? I'd tackle you if you didn't buy it, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
this is better than $100 million, at least for me. The idea that you can actually bring a little bit of change in the world, or if you win, a ton of change, and fight for the average American, fight for peace, fight for all the things that we care about, fight against corruption. And then, of course, there's another giant part of it, which is that even if you don't win, you're providing an alternative that people almost never get. And someone who's honest, who's not a regular politician, who doesn't have to kiss the ass of his own party and say, "Oh, and pretend that the leaders are geniuses and have done everything right." And so American politics is not really used to that. If you're a Democrat, you have to pretend the Democrats are 100% right. If you're a Republican, you have to pretend Trump, the lunatic's 100% right, etc. Well, I don't pretend any of those things. I'm just honest with people in a way that surprises them. But as it turned out, right now, we lost the first round of the district court case. Mainstream media 100% stonewalled me, but I appreciate guys like you having me on all the way from Piers Morgan, Charlemagne the God, you guys, Destiny, all these other folks,
Mhm.
Hassan, and so we're getting the word out the best that we can. And at this point, what I'm trying to do is win 15% of the vote in different places like Michigan, where there's a lot of Arabs and Muslims who agree with me on Gaza. But they got to write me in Michigan. But in Vermont, and Minnesota, two very progressive states, I'm on the ballot on Super Tuesday. You get to 15% and you get delegates. And all my delegates are going to be for peace and to make sure that we end the slaughter in Gaza.
That
I had a quick question for you. Is that I heard a soundbite that, along with trying to win and along with trying to provide an alternative, that you were also potentially trying to weaken Joe Biden and maybe help with another candidate. Am I, first of all, am I remembering correctly? And if so, I would love for you to dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah. So, first of all, there's a million theories online. So, I mean, if you heard that, you probably heard 28 other ones. So, yes, the way that mainstream media and the establishment works is if you don't bow your head to whoever is the quote unquote leader of that party, and they pick the leader, sometimes it's logical. Like in this case, it is. Joe Biden is already the president, he's the incumbent. So I get why they're selecting him. In the case of Hillary Clinton, she was not the incumbent, but they picked her anyway. And they said, no, she's going to win. And Bernie Sanders is a disloyal jerk who's destroying the Democratic Party when the people in power had already picked the most corrupt Democrat, the most establishment Democrat, and we were already planning to lose with her. And of
Hmm.
course they weren't. They thought they
of
were going to win. They were a height of arrogance, etc. Right? So my first point is, yeah, I disobey. I'm proud to disobey. Who the hell is Jamie Harrison? He's just a loser that Joe Biden picked and installed at the DNC just because he would follow whatever the hell Biden says. Why should I listen to the people who have destroyed this country? So I'm not going to
do you
listen to
find
them.
yourself sometimes being a bit of a contrarian? Like your initial intuition is kind of just to be a contrarian at
No,
first.
not at all.
No, not at all.
See, that's ironic. Uh, so look, guys, I know the establishment point of view. Let me just finish the point, earlier point, and then I'll come back to the contrarian point. The established point of view is if anyone ever dares run against the beloved leader that we have handpicked, we will destroy them and we will say they're trying to help the other side. But in reality, one of the things I just did is I appointed myself the Trump czar. Is that a real thing? No, I made it up. And what it means, though, is I'm going to kick Trump's ass and I'm going to do it 10,000 times better than Biden. And is that because, I want to get in good with Democrats? No, because I just don't want Trump to win. The reason I got in the race was because I was positive that Biden was going to lose to Trump. I don't care about Biden. I just want to make sure Trump doesn't win.
I mean,
And
I'm 100% with you on that. I think Trump is an existential threat to this country, and that's
yeah,
something that scares me because I do see a future where he could be president again.
yeah.
Um,
No, guys, that's what look, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. There's a 90% chance he's going to be president again.
it's a pretty
And the
big chance.
polls are overwhelming. And so if you don't believe polls, you just don't believe in science. You don't get it. You're just burying your head in the sand and hoping that everything's going to be all right because Ezra Klein said it in a podcast, and everybody in mainstream media is a bunch of idiots who can't read a poll. He's down 35 points on the border, 22 points on the economy, 21 points on crime. He's down in every single swing state. He has to win by 5. He's down by 4 on average. He's down 9 overall. This is nuts. He's not going to win. Joe Biden is not going to win. I mean, look, I hope. And look, once the primary is over, and I'm going to try to pummel Trump to make sure that Trump loses, but I can't, am I going to be able to pull it off on my own? I don't know, but I have to.
No, of course
Joe
not.
Biden barely even campaigns against them. So these guys are losers. They don't know how to win. And the reason is because America hates the establishment, but the Democratic Party is run by the establishment. So they're like, what do you mean? Don't they love Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden? No, you cannot read a poll because they are just as deluded as hardcore MAGA. They're in a bubble that is detached from reality. And that is why they can't even read numbers. That's how incompetent
I always say that the Democratic Party let Trump get elected as opposed to Trump beat them, in a sense.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of that comes into play because the Republican Party was so disjointed, so all over the place, so much infighting, and still they could not stop that group from
100%.
asserting their
Look,
power.
I can come back to how to beat Trump in a minute, but let me answer your contrarian question. No, brother, there are folks like that. And, Michael Tracy actually for a little while worked at TYT, and I'm not trying to start any flame wars or anything like that, but Michael at times felt contrarian. Like if there was a conventional wisdom, Michael was going to go in the opposite direction. But to me, that makes no sense at all. And I'm sure he would disagree, right? But wait, sometimes conventional wisdom is right. Should you eat with a fork and knife?
Hey, but this is why I bring up but then when you say mainstream media, it seems like, the mainstream, that which lies out of it, is contrarian. So within how would you go about figuring out whether the mainstream media is reporting something correct or incorrect, as opposed to saying it's mainstream media, they don't like it, they're against it? That itself doesn't seem to me to be a helpful way to explain to people what they should or shouldn't believe.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I say that because it's the same exact question I asked Noam Chomsky. So if I asked it, it must be great. I'm just playing around. All right, seriously, it really is a solid question. And when I asked him, he said, "Look, because obviously Noam Chomsky wrote the book literally on this issue, manufacturing consent." And so I said, "Well, look, I get my news from mainstream media, and I know its downsides. I know it's massive downsides, but I got to get my news from somewhere. So how do you read the New York Times? How do you watch CNN or whatever and distill what's reality from their, the way they warp the news for their own purposes, right?" And he said, "I only read for the facts. Anything that is framing, I dismiss, don't even read it. It's nonsense," right? And that's a pretty good guide, and that's what I do. So if they say X number of people have died in Gaza today, it's likely true, right? But if you read the framing around it, and The Guardian broke a really interesting story today about how CNN is covering Israel, and there's executives at CNN that demand that the reporters frame it in a way that is super positive to Israel. Hamas made Israel do this. Hamas is hiding behind human shields. Show the most horrific things that happen in Israel. Do not show horrific things that happen in Gaza, right? So I can read numbers. I can see what the United Nations is saying. So they're not, and MAGA and right wing are wrong. They don't get together in a room in the New York Times and just make up stuff out of whole cloth. No, they take facts and then massage them for their own point of view. And they don't do it because it's a conspiracy. There's no, well, at CNN, there's apparently memos written, but mainly it's groupthink, right? Yeah. And so they all assume Israel is right. The dirty Palestinians are wrong. Politicians are honorable and noble and wonderful, and they're having ideological debates. And the money in politics, the millions of dollars, doesn't affect them at all. At all. We're never going to mention it in the context of elections or legislation or why a bill passed. So I'm not saying ignore the facts. That's super important to getting informed. But if you look at their framing, it is 100% corporate framing to maintain the status quo, disguised as objective when it's nowhere near objective.
So one thing, Don, I wanted to know, Cenk, who are you trusting to get the facts from with what's going on in Israel?
Yeah, so first of all, I read it all, right? So and Guardian is terrific on it overall. The Lever and Intercept have broken some really good stories. And by the way, from time to time, CNN does a really good story. So Jeremy Diamond, I think, has been terrific. And so the IDF has invited him in thinking, oh, CNN's in our back pocket for the reasons that The Guardian explained, right? But Jeremy didn't play along. And he broke stories about how, no, there are no tunnels under the cemeteries that they're destroying, etc. But overall, you be careful about what you read, because it's going to have that framing, especially from, and you could tell when you read international stories versus American stories. The framing is totally different. In America, it's completely favored. And I ask people, like in mainstream media, you think CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., they all accidentally have the same framing? No, they have a groupthink, a frame of mind. Israel is right. Gaza and Palestinians are wrong, right? Are terrorists. And so, but things are changing because younger reporters are rebelling. I mean, who do you think gave the leak to The Guardian, right? Six journalists at CNN couldn't stand it anymore. And so they leaked to The Guardian. And younger reporters are way better, because they didn't grow up on the junk of television, the pulp of television. They grew up online where you could look up facts.
One of the things that I think I want to get across is manufacturing consent, as Noam Chomsky. It also has an opposite factor of the manufacturing of dissent, other powers, other interest groups, other groups with groupthink. Because I grew up in Israel, and what I hear from a lot of very radical right-wing religious nuts who always say, "Oh, that's the other narrative. That's they have groupthink. They don't report right. They're rebelling against these groups. It's a good thing that we're winning here. Or like we have to rebel in England. England is against this, or CNN is against us." Because I hear a lot of people who are pro-Zionist being like, "Oh, CNN is all fake news. They're all pro-Arabic." And what's interesting to me is that you're saying that as well. And for viewers, how do you actually get about, like, what is the epistemology of just understanding that there is both sides of the media, whether it be alternative media and mainstream media, have groupthink, have agendas that they're pushing. These things are very seldomly truly independent news. We saw what happened with the Daily Wire. We saw what happened with other left news organizations. They do have, at the end of the day, groupthink and biases and add people to uphold. So
yeah. Look, you're not wrong to bring that up. I think that's a great point. So, because we all live in our own bubbles. So the first thing you have to do is question your own bubble. So, yeah, I mean, look, honestly, I think right-wing Israeli supporters are among the most deluded on the planet. The mainstream media will say that Israel's 99% right in killing 27,000 civilians, and they'll say, "No, they didn't say we were angels on top. Oh, they're pro-Arab, right?" And by the way, the other side will have their own bias, and we'll look at it, and they didn't say Israel was the devil, et cetera, right? And so, and you see that in American politics, you see it in Israeli politics even more so. So what you have to do is verify, double check, and keep looking for what comports with reality, what actually matches what people are saying. So, for example, if you watch right-wing media in domestic politics, Candace Owens, for example, the other day said that Hollywood is yeah.
I died of laughter when she said that.
Right. Hollywood is run by the CIA on behalf of Satan. Okay, if you find facts confirming that, then okay, then you follow Candace Owens. Yeah, you trust her, right?
I mean, I would also say it's a very big anti-Semitic dog whistle. The CIA is funding Hollywood, which is the Jews. Like, especially in right-wing circles, that's a very big dog whistle.
100%. There's a million.
I mean, I think it's really important to examine what's going on and try to have a sound epistemology that allows you to navigate through what's probably a lot of media bias. But I did want to ask you about something specific, Cenk, this issue of hospital bombing. Mm-hmm. Now, this one, I think you might be wrong on. I could be wrong about it as well. But on October 17th, you said Israel bombed a hospital, killing 300 to 500 civilians inside. Meanwhile, the intelligence sources from the United States, France, United Kingdom, and Canada are saying that this was an Islamic Jihad errant rocket Have you changed your mind on that? Or
Yeah, so that one's one of the toughest ones there is. And so I thought about taking that one down a couple of times, but not in the beginning. Because, so first of all, there's overwhelming propaganda from the IDF. So if the IDF says something, there's no way in the world I would report that without it being verified by other sources, right? And probably a couple of sources. They are basically in the propaganda business. So when they said it, I was like, yeah. Because they say every bombing is angelic and they meant to kill only Hamas, but golly gee, they just killed 20,000 some odd civilians by accident because they have the worst aim in the world, total incompetent military. It's outrageous. Nothing they say is believable, right? But over the course of time, there was conflicting reports, and most of the reports started leaning in the direction of it was probably Islamic Jihad. It never, to my satisfaction, we never got a very clear answer because there were still dissenting voices saying, I don't think it was Islamic Jihad. So that's why if I thought it was definitive, I would have taken it down. But I would challenge you back and say, let's say that I was wrong about that and the sources that I relied on were wrong about that. And it's going to sound like, if you're on the Israeli side, outrageous thing to say, but let's talk it out. What difference does it make? That was one of over 30,000 bombs that the IDF has dropped and admits to dropping. They dropped 2,000-pound bombs, which are and unguided bombs. They've slaughtered so many thousands of civilians. Yeah. Oh, wow. You might have been right about one of the bombs. Is that a big bragging point?
Well, I'll tell you why.
Hold on. Let me say one other thing about that. That's so important. Because they use that one example out of literally 30,000 bombs, now well over 30,000 bombs, to make it seem like, oh, don't trust anything that the UN says. Don't trust anything that reporters say. Don't trust we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything. We're so innocent. We're the most innocent people in the world. We're the most innocent military in the world. El Shifa Hospital, right? And then, well, how about all the propaganda of the other hospitals and the other schools and the cemeteries, et cetera? Well, they were 100% wrong. So well, I find it super uninteresting.
The thing that's important to me, as a voter, I would want you to leave it up if you truly believed it, and I'm not sure if you do, because it sounds like you're saying you're kind of leaving it up to make a point. It sounds like to me, but
no, that's absurd. Okay, so first of all, has all the reporters that got Israeli propaganda 100% wrong? Is CNN, you read the Guardian piece, they just regurgitate whatever the IDF says. And then if it's proven wrong, most of the time they don't take it down.
They should.
But maybe like 2 weeks, 2 months later, they take it down when the damage is already done. So if you want to find one tweet where it's an 80-20 split and I'm not sure, and it was months ago, you want me to go back and analyze to see if the 20% is definitely wrong? Fine, whatever. But it's
I'm just saying that. Well, I would want a president to go back and delete that if they didn't currently believe it, right? Like if they weren't convinced.
Or maybe put a comment, or maybe put a correction.
I agree with posting, like even reposting again if you're right about it, because don't you think that's harmful to leave up? And again, I'm not sure if you actually believe it. Do you believe that is correct information? Because if you don't believe it is, you should take it down.
No. This is false equivalency. So you're talking you've nitpicked a tweet that is not 100% in either direction from months and months ago. So, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll go back and I'll double back and see if they got to 100% consensus on it. And I'll put a note on it if it requires a note. Okay. But guys, when you focus on that, it makes it seem like people pick apart every single tweet I have, massively pick it apart. And I have thousands of tweets. And so you found one that is not crystal clear. But everyone that's listening should understand that means there is tens of thousands of tweets of mine that are impeccable in terms of its fact basis.
Cenk, to be honest, I'm giving you the same critique I would give to Donald Trump. I nail him for this all the time. I nail Biden for it all the time. For me, I like a leader to be fallibilistic in the sense that they can go back and delete or correct something if they currently don't believe it. And again,
I just told you I'm not sure about it.
Well, so if you're not sure about it, you should take it down.
Go back. Okay, I just told you I'm going to go back.
Okay. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Thanks.
I appreciate that response, and I respect it. Thank you.
I have a little bit of a small a small out of the way bit. So I actually started out as like very pro-Israel. Like I was believing a lot of what the IDF said. Now I'm very agnostic. I don't trust anything coming from anywhere. As you pointed out, in war there's propaganda. I'm curious though. Are you screening for propaganda on the other side too? Do you take a similarly skeptical lens to propaganda from the Palestinian side? And if you do control for that, how do you control for that? Because I'm aware there's a massive power imbalance in terms of the ability to put out messages. But I am curious because you just didn't mention it, and I assume that you're doing it. So I was kind of
Yeah.
curious to do that.
Yeah. Honestly, when it comes from Hamas, their military or political wing, I don't believe it at all.
Okay.
And so, does Hamas do propaganda? Of course. If you're on the
We got
Palestinian
the of
side,
course.
Yeah.
if you're on the Palestinian side and you think Hamas is angels that would never do propaganda, come on, brothers and sisters. That doesn't help your case at all. To say outlandish things. Both sides are obviously doing propaganda, and it's our job to suss it out and, to the best of our abilities, to deliver what is reality to the American people. So that's
Honestly,
why, but on the other hand, when Israel says, well, everything in Gaza is run by Hamas, so don't believe anything anyone says, doctors, nurses, etc. That's nonsense. The United Nations has confirmed that the health ministry has roughly correct numbers and reliable numbers.
Yeah.
So if the guys on the ground that are independent confirm that, then those are the numbers I'm going to use.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's I would say, as much as I love true information and true news, I would also say in a weird way, I would feel like both sides aren't fighting the war very well if they weren't engaging in propaganda. It's almost to be expected at this point.
I mean, yeah, Machiavellianism is and all that stuff it's how the governments run. Governments are interested in propagating their interests and maintaining their influence. We know that's how governments work.
Can I just say one quick thing about that?
Yeah.
That's true of every government. And I need the viewers to understand that. So, like, look, I know when it comes to especially your own ethnic background, people get super touchy, right? I'm Turkish. So when I say things against the Turkish government or things that, Turks might not agree with overall, they get super mad at me and they feel like I've betrayed them. But my job is to be objective. By the way, also true of America. So when reporters the other day, they got mad at the Pentagon for clearly misstating something, right? I'm like, guys, do you not know that the Pentagon is lying like 90% of the time when there's a bombing or a conflict? Like, for example, when we bombed a wedding in Afghanistan and killed about 84 people, they said, oh, no, we didn't. No, that wasn't us. And there was no wedding. I mean, everything they said was a 100% lie. Yeah. But it was all printed on the front page. Everybody consumed. We're perfectly innocent. And it was the dirty Taliban, dirty Muslims, whatever, that deserved it and had it coming, right?
Yeah, this is why breaking news, we should all be skeptical
of. 27, they issue a correction that nobody sees. And so that's one of the reasons I get frustrated at mainstream media. If the Pentagon is saying something, it's incumbent upon you to triple check it, not print it as if it's true. And that's my government.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's just like a PSA. If you get news, just be aware that you should wait a little bit because news coming out right away is always going to be less factual than down the line when investigations have done and reports come through and you have more sources. That's just an important thing for people to know. People like to run from news source to news source. But one of the things that I know is true about you, because I've been watching you for a long time. You've been very instrumental in. I was watching TYT when I was younger, and everything's around. Again, you're like one of the grandfathers of modern political online world.
Let's go Godfather instead of a grandfather, but I hear
fine, Godfather. I'll go with the Godfather. And you have you have gone through many criticisms around the Armenian genocide. You have gone through many criticisms and around. I mean, even that ridiculous, funny moment where you talked about bestiality on one of your streams. And your haters like to use it over and over and over again. And one of the things that you've done really well is say, well, these are embarrassing moments. You always you can fuck up on screen. That's just a normal part of people, or even changing your mind on thing. And without getting into a debate, because I don't think that's interesting or helpful, what would be like, because every claim that we make, every belief that we have should be fallible, right? That's how scientific inquiry works. That's how epistemology works. what would be the thing that will falsify your belief that what's happening in Israel does amount to genocide? Because the ICJ has yet to finish ruling, and we can recognize that ruling. I'm someone who agrees with the international community. If that ruling says genocide, I would be like, that amounts to genocide. That's the ICJ's ruling. Whether do I believe it now? I'm very agnostic about it, so I withhold belief. I don't know if it amounts to genocide. It's definitely a horrific amount of people being killed. The civilian to combatant ratio is about 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, which is high. It's normal for urban environments, but it's generally very high. What would be the thing that will falsify that belief for you? That would be like, something, I need to see X, Y, and Z to believe that Israel is not committing a genocide.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible at this point, but I'll try to get you an answer, okay? And I'll tell you why it's nearly impossible. So, Srebrenica was considered a genocide by the United Nations, and 6,000 Muslims were slaughtered by the Serbs. Now, the Serbs did not have the intent to kill every Muslim in the world. That's 1.6 billion people. They would have had no capacity, and they did not have the intent to do that. But they targeted the Muslims there for being Muslim, and hence it was a genocide. People often get genocide and Holocaust mixed up, and actually the Turks get that mixed up more than anyone else does, right? So the Armenian genocide is clearly a genocide. There was ethnic cleansing, there was massacres, and they were targeted because they were Armenians. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they were trying to kill every Armenian, but they certainly targeted them based on the fact that they were Armenians. So that's the definition of a genocide. And so when people say, "Oh, Cenk doesn't believe in the Armenian genocide," it's total nonsense, total, utterly, completely not true, right? But when I was younger, I believed Turkish propaganda, so I understand, like, why they might make that point out of an honest mistake, although these days it's mainly just trolls who know it's not true. But also why people's ethnicity and their background could blind them, right?
Mhm.
So in terms of what Israel's done so far, massively disproportionate killing of civilians. Are they targeting them because they're Palestinians, and as opposed to a general targeting? Well, obviously, there's no one but Palestinians there. Are they? And so the reason why it becomes nearly impossible is, one, it's much bigger massacres and ethnic cleansing than Srebrenica, which is already a genocide. Number two, there's already been massive reporting from New York Times, CNN, etc., that shows they're dropping 4 times the size of the bombs that America dropped in Mosul, as an example, in an urban area. So that shows intent that you're not trying to target. The kill zone is huge for a 2,000-pound bomb. They're dropping unguided bombs. They've destroyed, I believe, about 70% of the buildings in Gaza. So in order for me to believe that it's not a genocide, 85% of Gazans are displaced, somebody would have to prove to me that either they didn't drop those bombs and the buildings are still intact, and this is all one giant Black Mirror episode, and a quarter of the people of Gaza are not starving and 27,000 didn't die, or they did, but my God, we were totally wrong. It turns out 25,000 of them were Hamas fighters, and yeah, okay, 2,000 civilians, which is a tragedy, but my God, they really targeted Hamas very effectively. But it looks like the ship has sailed. None of those things look like they're anywhere near true. So they would have to just, you see what I'm saying? Like,
I
don't
hear what
think
you're
that there's a
saying,
plausible
but
scenario.
I think that there, might be more things to consider, like combatant non-combatant ratio, compare
Yeah.
that to other conflicts, because as much as it's like horrible to say, and it's like death toll might be a necessary condition for genocide, but it's not a sufficient one, right? It's like you need to kill people to have a genocide. It needs to be a significant amount of people, but that itself doesn't denote genocide in the same way that the destruction of buildings is sufficient but not necessary. What is for you, like, when I see things like, from my perspective, leaflets being dropped and humanitarian corridors and them calling in advance and telling areas to clear, when I hear that, and that's not just Israeli propaganda, that's facts that are happening, I think to myself, well, that to me is indication of anti-genocidal intent.
No.
I know you might disagree here, but I wonder why would you disagree? How is that not evidence for intent against the fact?
Okay, so brother, when they were dropping leaflets and knocking on doors like a decade ago, 2 decades ago, I thought it was plausible. And I would report it as, well, it's better than not doing that, right? And so it gives people a chance to maybe leave the building, etc., right? But this is not like that. They destroyed the entire North. It's gone. It's obliterated.
But did they
And then
drop
they said,
leaflets
hold
or
on,
not?
hold on. Then they said, we're not going to bomb the South. Then they bombed the living crap out of the South. They said, oh, don't worry, go to the South. You'll be safe. And then they bombed the hell out of it. And so the idea that these leaflets, I mean, they're dropping the leaflets with the bombs. It's absurd. It has no effect at all. And at this point, it's such an obvious excuse to pretend you're not doing terrorism when you're obviously doing terrorism. So here, when I say terrorism, like you make a good point about kill ratio. It's an unfortunate conversation. It feels awkward, but you're not wrong. Like if it turns out you killed 80% terrorists and you had 20% collateral damage, again, heartbreaking, but a little bit more justifiable. If it turns out you're overwhelmingly killing civilians and you happen to get a couple of terrorists, but hey, then that's ethnic cleansing and that's genocide, etc.
But this
So,
is
for example, hold on, let me finish the thought. So Hamas, actually, people don't know this very much because barely ever reported in America, killed about 840 civilians and 300 some odd troops, IDF soldiers, right? So their kill ratio was about 2/3 civilians. So that's awful, horrible. I condemned it on day one massively. I condemn it to this day, right? Dumb strategy, immoral strategy, wrong in every way. Now, Israel has killed about 27,000 civilians, a little bit more now, and IDF claims that about 9,000 of them are Hamas fighters. Now, that's a comical claim. I don't know any objective person that believes that it's as high as 9,000, and they do from time to time say, we haven't done a lot of damage, we haven't gotten any of the leaders, they haven't really been able to go into tunnels. But even if you take it at face value that they killed 9,000 Hamas fighters, well, that's 2/3. So now they have the same civilian kill ratio as Hamas, except they've now killed 25 times the number of civilians,
right,
which in my mind makes them 25 times the terrorists.
But it's almost like we're negating the right, the intent behind it, right? Because we know that let's just say, because most kill death ratio, I don't want to say kill death, sounds like I'm playing Call of Duty. Most civilians to combatant ratios in urban environments do look about 70%. I did some research on this in general. I was trying to look at different military history, and it ends up being around 70 to 80% in urban warfare.
But clarify, do you mean modern, or do you,
because modern, like in the 80s, 90s, you know?
Okay. Yeah, because if you go back to World War II and World War
I,
that's
different.
why we passed war
you see
crimes.
90% death rates. You see insanity. You see like 90% of the people getting killed are civilians. It's absurd.
That's right.
Modern war. It's and let's just start. In an ideal world, I would like zero. I mean, I would want to move towards that society, of course, 100%. But for me, just the brute ratio within itself doesn't equivocate, especially.
Well, then let me ask you something. Then does that excuse Hamas? They have the same ratio as Israel.
But again, ratio is it might be a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. We know that Hamas, and it's not up to the question, had the intent to go kill civilians. It wasn't hidden. That was fair game. And it's also true that Israeli leaders like Netanyahu talked about Amalek, which is psychotic to bring up. Other people in the Israeli parliament, far right extremists, have talked about turning Gaza into a parking lot. Some guys said they want to drop a nuke on it. And that exists, especially within a democratic society. You have these outlying voices. Heck, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about taking away Ilhan Omar from her seat, which she's a citizen. She has representation. She has a duty to her constituents, which I was very loud about on Twitter. But that to me is the difference. It is the brute numbers, is the brute facts enough to say, yes, genocide? That's for me a problem that I can't get over because of the intentional part.
Yeah. So I look, I get why you're coming at it from that way, but to be honest, I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. And I think that Israel focuses on, and America also focuses on that, partly to deceive people. So I'm not denying that Hamas's intent was to kill both soldiers and civilians. I think that's obvious. But let's look at Israel's intent. So I just told you, if you take IDF propaganda, they have the same ratio as Hamas. If you don't believe IDF propaganda, their ratio is much, much worse. But they claim don't have intent. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe them at all. At all. You destroyed 70% of the buildings in Gaza. They blew up a university with a improvised, like with a controlled explosion.
Yes.
Why are you destroying their schools? And then you're telling me you're not ethnically cleansing them, as I see with my own eyes, and the whole world sees with our own eyes, that you're ethnically cleansing them.
I mean,
So
they claim
that-
that they're blowing up infrastructure. They blame that they're blowing up specific
But what
areas.
does the university have anything to do with Hamas? And they didn't show that there was any tunnels underneath the university. They never showed that there was any tunnels under the 16 cemeteries that they desecrated. So you would have to be the most gullible man alive to say, even though they're killing more civilians than 25 times the number of civilians and a worse civilian to soldier ratio than Hamas is, and they've just pulverized the place, I believe their intent is angelic, and they just keep missing. Oh God, we missed again. We missed again. We missed again. We missed again. It's preposterous. It's laughable. No one in their right mind would believe
you think that there are legitimate claims of buildings and areas that they've blown up where they blew up the tunnels and they blow up the buildings around it, and that does happen?
I think that it's rare, but of course it happens. So whenever they blow up a tunnel, for example, I believe it a lot more because the tunnels are where Hamas is. So when you blow up a residential building, it doesn't hurt Hamas at all, and they know that because the tunnels are underneath the building and are totally unaffected.
But what if the residential building had an entrance?
Tunnel, right? I believe you that on your intent. If you blow up a residential building and it doesn't affect the tunnel at all, you're an obvious liar and a terrorist.
Well, a lot of residential buildings, from what I've looked at, and of course everyone here can be wrong. That's the whole point. That though they had access points from the tunnels. So you hit the residential building, that access point is eliminated from that tunnel, and you can. Why do you just don't buy it?
No, so brother, propaganda. You're telling me that the only way to take out an access point to a tunnel is to blow up a residential building and kill 327 people inside? That can't be right. That's the most monstrous thing I've ever heard.
It's lower risk to IDF personnel.
Now, maybe that's right. They're saying, I don't care. I'm just going to murder all these civilians to avoid at best, in a best case scenario, to avoid a tiny bit of risk for the IDF, extra risk.
Why doesn't the country have a duty to not let any of its soldiers die if they push, they door knock, they drop leaflet, they called an evacuation? If all of that is, I know you don't believe it, but let's say that is true. Would you then be saying, maybe that is a legitimate strategy? Or if rockets are being sent from an area, you stop the rockets, but it happened to be in the Scouts building, which we know they had rocket installations in. During those scenarios, you would say, if you were a leader, you would do the same thing, would you not?
Yeah, I would. Okay. Yeah, if they could prove that they actually made a significant effort to get the civilians out of harm's way and they were shooting at a military target, then I totally get it, right? But even when they do propaganda, they bring CNN camera crews in and they go, oh, you see there's the tunnel access. And CNN's like, no, there's no tunnel access. And they're like, oh, you see the artillery was in the cemetery. They're like, no, it wasn't. That's just a random picture. They say, oh, we went into the hospital. We found a command center. Here's 2 flak jackets and a pair of boots. You guys are comical. This propaganda is like the worst propaganda I've ever seen. So it's not credible at all. And one other thing I have to say, when we talk about intent, let's talk about Israel's intent in occupying the Palestinians for 75 years. That is the core of the problem. And it is evil. It is wrong. It is brutal. It is oppression. So don't tell me you have the right intent when you kept these people in an open air prison, 5 million people, for 75 brutal years. And every empire can claim we had a right to defend ourselves. That's what the Turks could say about the Armenian genocide. That's what everybody, by the way, even the Germans said that they were defending themselves. It is literally what every empire says, and it's not credible.
So let me say a couple things here. So first, let's talk about that. I mean, I think you would agree that just because empires have claimed similar things doesn't mean those claims are similarly reliable, right? Like the Jews hurt the Germans by virtue of existing, and Israel can colorably claim that having Palestine so close by without security hurt them because suicide bombers. So I'm not saying that makes them correct. I'm just saying it's not exactly the same thing.
No two things are the same. Yeah. Okay. And those examples are very different. That's right.
Yeah, of course. But the real question I wanted to ask you is, as a person who is not as versed in this as you or Don, although I have done a little bit of research, is let's pretend for a second that it is a genocide. Not pretend, but assume to go your way. And let's say that the IDF does have this intent. What do you think the motive is? Because looking at the historical record, again, from the outside, it seems like Israel has offered Palestine 2-state solutions, peace deals, stuff like that, repeatedly and incessantly, and they've walked away from the table every time. So to me, I don't really understand what Israel's motive would be to cleanse the area. They've tried to give it, again, you're shaking your head, so I can't wait to hear what you say. But from my experience and from the knowledge base of many people who are somewhat casual about this, Israel has attempted to make peace deals and has attempted to give the area away to Jordan and Egypt. So again, explain to me the motive here.
Yeah.
Explain to me what their motive is, especially in light of this historical record or seeming historical record.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First is there is no Israel. There is different factions within Israel. So there is no monolith. There is no the Jews, Israel, right? As there is no the America. Dick Cheney is very different than Barack Obama. And so we have a lot of different perspectives here in America, and there's a lot of different perspectives in Israel. So if you say Yitzhak Rabin was genuinely trying to make peace, I totally agree. Okay. But if you say Ariel Sharon or Netanyahu was genuinely trying to make peace, comical. Although I would give it to Sharon a lot more than I would give it to Netanyahu. And Sharon is a butcher, but Netanyahu makes him look like child's play. So at least Ariel Sharon did something to get out of Gaza. It was very incomplete and wound up causing a lot of damage the way that he did it. But it depends on the facts. It depends on what faction they're coming from. So there is no monolith that's Israel, right? So that's point one. So point two is these offers of peace deals that everybody keeps using, in my opinion, as talking points. I was there. I've been around. I'm the grandfather of a lot of these movements, right? So I've been around a long time. We've been doing the show 22 years. I've been doing this overall for over 30 years, right? And I was there and covering it in terms of those peace offers. And even Bill Clinton said after the most viable one that it was the Israelis who blew that deal up. Okay, so now you don't hear that anymore, but you can go back and search it and you can see the quotes. Okay,
well, I'm curious.
So an offer of peace is a great start. I love it. And I wish we could go back to that, right? And I've offered a solution for how we can go back to that. But doesn't it depend on what's in the deal? The answer is obviously yes, right? So, for example, if the peace offer, as it was in many of the instances, is okay, now we took half of this land back in 1948. Now we're going to take an extra 10%, 20% of what remains of West Bank or Gaza Strip. Well, that's not a very good offer, right? So what if they said we're going to take 90% of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and they go, well, I offered a peace deal. These sons of bitch Arabs won't take it, right? No,
I think a big part of that was also because there were already people, families, communities living there, and it would be logistically disastrous, and B, to just be like everyone get up and go. There are many towns like the one that I grew up in, which was literally like one side across the Green Line, right? I grew up in Oranit, a place in Israel. Now, while I understand that I literally lived in a settlement in an occupied area, I also recognize, well, there were families living there and kids living there, families who had nothing to do, who just grew up, in the 90s, who raised their kids. I think that there needs to be a way to also, you can't just get up, hey, 1 million people get up and go, move to a different area.
No, I would do that in a second.
You would do that in a second.
Yeah. And so first of all, if Israel says, hey, we're going to keep 4%, 6% of the West Bank, et cetera, for the settlers or for their other needs, if I'm the Palestinians, I do that deal. And in fact, if I was Arafat, I would have done the deal anyway, even though it was not a great deal, because I, unlike Arafat, understood you're never going to get right of return. And you're only going to lose power and leverage as the years go on, because you have no military. They have a massive military, and they're backed by the greatest military ever built, the U.S. military. Dumbass, take the deal, even though that deal sucked. Okay. So I'm not saying that the Palestinians were angels and brilliant and the Israelis were all wrong. No, peace deals are messy, and you don't always get exactly what you want. Right. So now, having said that, brother, I have zero sympathy for the settlers. Zero, none. They're religious zealots.
That's not true of all of them. And I think
I don't care.
That's not true of all of them. There are some who are just either trying to like raise their family, get a home, trying
Yeah,
to get
go
a
raise it in a place where you're not stealing other people's land. The whole point of the settlements is to steal Palestinian land.
I,
Why are
I
they going there? They're going there to take land, which will make peace much harder. And they want the whole West Bank. They want all of Gaza. And that the
but there's a
settlers are
difference
religious
between the right.
lunatics who
There's a big
believe
difference.
that God promised them that land.
It
So I'm
might
not
But
going
but
to sit there
there
and
are
go,
those
"Oh,
who don't
nice
think
job
that.
on stealing the land. Keep
But
it."
but
No.
not everyone who moves out to the West Bank when they're young, they turn 18, 19, 20, they're trying to buy a home. Not all of those people are there with the intent to steal land and to spread the Jewish faith. They're not all right-wing radical
No, then they should
Zionists,
move out. I agree with you. Kids don't know, right? And they get to be 18, 19. Well,
right?
then you got a choice to make, brother. Are you going to sit there and steal more land, or are you going to go to be a decent human being and go somewhere else instead
So
of trying to
so
create endless conflict and war with Palestinians?
but you're giving so much ownership to people who are just pushed by their material conditions, right? I think that like when we look at um, societies and organizations, we know that it's not just people there championing, and there's economic incentives. A lot of this is because of the way Israel's government, especially under Bibi, has been captured by the right wing, those who want to kick all the Palestinians out of East Jerusalem and make policy based on that, and policy that helps development within the West Bank. But at the same time, I feel that it's uh, uh, very harmful within Israel, within the political nature of it, and a way towards peace to just remove them. I know how much the religious right in Israel became very, very fervent after the removal of people from Gush Katif in Gaza, after they displaced them in Gaza. That brought upon a whole new movement of right-wing Zionism. And I think that there needs to be, in the same way that we view Israel and other nations as affected by their geopolitics, Israelis, in a sense, are just like any other people affected by their geopolitics. So punishing those who are simply victims of a larger geopolitical movement is just wrong to me. I can't see that as
Yeah,
being right.
absolutely not. I couldn't disagree more. I think the settlers are the most guilty
Healthy
people in this entire scenario. And so I can prove it to you. Imagine the Palestinians, if they were allowed to, which of course they're not, but if they were allowed to, they just moved a couple of million people into Tel Aviv and Haifa. And they said, what? We're settlers now. What? Now it's our land. What do you mean? Okay, now I'm staying and now it's mine. What? They're innocent kids. They moved in with their parents. So what? Now it's our land. Tel Aviv is ours. Haifa is ours. That's absurd. You can't do that. And so, look, guys, I would kick out all the settlers with not one shred of concern. Oh, is Yahweh going to be upset? And are they? Oh my God, I have to worry about whether. Well, they had planned to murder all the Palestinians and take all their land, but oh golly, gee, some of them were
Yeah,
innocent.
but that's not. But you're calling my parents murderers. You're calling my parents murderers.
I'm sorry,
I grew up in
brother, but
Orny.
they should never be settlers.
But
They're
you, but
religious zealot nut jobs.
no, they're
Sorry,
not.
better.
No, they're
Sorry,
not. But they're not. But they're not.
Then
You're
what the hell are they
attributing.
doing there? What are they doing
They
there?
wanted to raise a family.
That's the only place to raise a family. Is
When
it
the
a place that's
economic
gonna create a
conditions are
massive
difficult,
conflict and
when the
war
economic
and
when the
stealing other
economic
people's land?
when the
Sorry, but
economic
there's a million
conditions
places to raise a family.
when the
Sorry.
economic
Hold
first
on,
of all,
maybe I can
one second, but
help get in the middle here.
Let him go, John. Let him go.
Orny, which the town that I grew up in, wasn't built like it wasn't like people were displaced from the air. Let's just while it is an occupied territory right across the green line, it wasn't an area where the people living there were like, we gotta kill Palestinians. It was kind of like, it's not totally inside the West Bank. We're against that, but we also want to raise families, and the climate in Tel Aviv and in Netanya is horrible. We can't afford that. This is a good compromise for us, and they move in there. But they're not. We still went, and we went to Kfar Saba, which
Why? But brother,
Palestinian village.
be honest. Why?
This is why.
Why there? Why
Because it was
there?
cheap. It was cheap.
Okay. So what
It's
if
an
the
economic
Palestinians
condition.
said, hey, listen, man, I think Haifa's cheap. I'm just gonna go take it. Would you be okay with it? And go, what? They're just innocent.
I wouldn't punish
Can
the
I move
people
a
who are
million
doing that.
Palestinians into Haifa right now?
I wouldn't punish the people who are doing that. And after they have
You'd let 'em
homes and they
stay.
live there and they have,
You'd let them stay.
I'm personally for a two-state federation between the Palestinians and Israel who have a supranational government. That's my real point. But I don't think that the solution is punishing innocent families. Just like
But
I don't
they're
think
not
the solution-
innocent. They went there on purpose to take Palestinian land. So I'm not saying like punish them, like hurt them. No, but
You're
you
saying just
can't
kick 'em out.
stay
You're
on
saying just
stolen
kick 'em out.
property. If I come to your house and I take half of it and I go, well, now I'm innocent after I took it. That's
Yeah,
not a thing. You're still a
but-
thief.
but individual, the way two individuals relate, the way we deal with individual, morals isn't the same way we view morals and solutions between two nations, right? You can't compare war to two individuals fighting in the street. Just you can't compare solutions, but I come to your house and take your fridge. It's not the same thing. It's entirely different. Do you not see that?
Well, the other one is way worse because when you take my fridge or take half my home, it's just two people. But not only do the settlers take the land, but they make sure that the conflict never ends. Because whenever it goes to end, the settlers go, no way, we're staying. And
Yeah,
it's
they don't want to leave their homes. Of course, they don't want to leave their
our
homes.
land, our God, right?
Of course,
So
they don't
they
want to leave their
make peace
homes.
impossible. I'm sorry, but they're the absolute number one biggest problem in this whole conflict. And I love your brother, and I get it. You're a good person. I'm sure your parents were good people. And by the way, in a peace deal, I don't get what I want. So would I make a peace deal where some of the settlers stay? And yes, that'll drive the Palestinians crazy. But yes, I would do that deal because you make peace with your enemies. You don't make peace with your allies
Well,
and your
isn't
friends,
wasn't
and you
that
don't get a
that
perfect peace deal.
wasn't that a part of the peace deal as well? When in the Oslo deals that broke apart, right? That was the idea of
Yeah,
keeping some of the
that's right.
settlements
And
there.
I would have taken that deal. That's right.
But
So what
but
I'm telling
I
you
just
is
I just want
I'm
I
being
just I
honest about my moral, massive misgivings about the settlers who I think have caused gigantic problems and have done it on purpose and have been incredibly indifferent to the feelings and the lives of Palestinians, incredibly indifferent. Okay. But
I think
but
that
I
there
got to
are
make peace
settlements
with
and other.
people. So I will leave some settlements if that's what it takes for
I
peace.
know, but the one thing that troubles me really is that you're willing to paint all of those people there as like immoral, religious
But
fanatics, and I
I
think
know
that
it's
is
your
just
family,
wrong.
so it's super personal to
No,
you,
because
brother.
they're not religious fanatics, not at all.
But they were
The
willing
opposite.
to go into Palestinian land,
They were
and
willing to
because it
go
was
and buy a
cheap,
home because it was
they were
cheap.
willing to,
But it
and
was.
they know that. But do they not know that that's going to make the conflict much harder to resolve? They know that, but
But
they
you
did
know
it
that
for
people
personal
don't
gain.
make. But people, right? Not governments, not economies. Human beings are driven by their material conditions. It reminds me of like when right wingers talk about, but don't they know that they're going to go to jail if they go and shoplift from CVS in New York? And I'm like, well, why are they doing this? Why are people behaving in this way? Why are people behaving in immoral ways? We can't just castigate them as evil, immoral, like, and then punish them like that.
And
There's much
but
more systemic issues for this.
and you're picking an outlier case, which is your family near the border, etc. And I'm saying to you, even in that scenario, I'm sorry, brother, but you cannot go into somebody else's land, cause a giant problem, and then go, well, I wanted cheaper land. But they are still the great minority. You know that. Let me see if you will agree to this. Most of the settlers are religious zealots who believe that God gave them that land, and they will take that land no matter what happens to the Palestinians, and they couldn't care less. And the great majority of them despise the Palestinians.
I think most Israelis despise Palestinians. Let's just make that clear. It's like most Palestinians despise Israelis. These people have been in conflict for 75 years, right? Like that's something that needs to change. That's something that I want to change. From my people who are in Israel, and every time I'm a little bit pro-Palestinian, they call me a Jew hater, self-Jew hater. And then when I am a little bit pro-Israel, I get, oh, you support genocide, you want to kill all the Palestinians. I get that all the time. So
Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, on both sides.
that's for sure. But I would also say that within the assembly, it depends which ones you're talking about. Any of the settlements around East Jerusalem are occupied by fanatic psychopaths. You go to like where Abraham is Hebron, like that's insane over there. But there's other areas where that's not the case. Do I know if it's the majority? I actually don't have the stats on that. I don't know exactly, but I'm definitely willing to bet just from like the general Israeli population, the way polls lined up, that yeah, Israel has a 40% community. Most of that 40% is in the West Bank who are right-wing religious zealots. Like I'm aware of this, who their entire thing is about like, oh, we should go all the way to Damascus or whatever it is. I'm not for that. I just think it's very important to just not paint all of the Israelis or anyone who lives in the West Bank with a broad brush. Because I think what that does is it does something similar that the Zionists do to the Palestinians and just paint them with the broad brushes, anti-Israel, anti-hated. They hate Jews. They want to kill Jews. I don't think, and I worry about that, and that's
I think
language
that's
specifically.
look, I understand, but in any group, you're going to find outliers, and you're going to find a certain percentage who are good people that happen to be there for different circumstances. But overall, the settlers to me are very much like Hamas. And so you could say, hey, there might be good people inside Hamas, but I'm not going to trust that. And I'm a secular Muslim. So there's a good chance that the fundamentalist Muslims inside Hamas or Al Qaeda or ISIS or any of those groups would cut my head off in a second as an apostate. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go just
Likewise.
wander into there and go, well, I bet some of them are okay people. Right. So,
But I think that's a disingenuous comparison because Israel is a democratic state.
no,
It has
settlers. Are you kidding me? If I went into Israeli settlers with the opinions that I have, and they know that I have, right? I don't think I'd walk out alive.
I think it depends where you go. If you're in East Jerusalem, probably get beat up. If you're in Ariel,
No, they killed me.
if you're in Ariel, nothing's gonna happen to you. I promise you, nothing will happen to you.
Okay, you could find outliers, but there's
No,
no way
Ariel
that-
is one of the biggest settlements. It's
should
just
So listen, guys. Look, I have a policy of never going to the Gulf countries because they're run by fundamentalist Muslim dictators. Okay, and I have said things about how secular I am that would anger them greatly. I'm not going to take the chance because I think there's some percentage chance that they would murder me if I go to their countries. So I am not going to go into a settlement filled with religious zealots who hate Palestinians and look forward to stealing their land for Yahweh and then hope for the best. No, there's a great chance they'll murder me.
I think
So,
I think
as
it's a
a
bit
group,
hyperbolic. I think
They're
that
a
I think you're hyperbolic.
giant cancer. And so it is what it is. And I get that you're from there, but brother, I'm from Turkey. You think my family and friends are happy that I say, yeah, the Turks
course
did
not.
Armenian genocide? They're
Of course
livid with me.
Of course.
Livid.
I mean, but I'm sure if I go to Turkey and I'm like, hey, I'm Jewish from America, I don't think I'll be killed even in the most radical.
No,
Unless
but
in
Turkey's
most
very
places.
secular.
I mean, Israel's very secular overall.
Yeah, of course. I could go to Israel.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to the settlements.
I mean,
You see the
depends,
difference.
but depends which settlement, right? There are settlements and there are settlements. Just like there are areas in Turkey and there are like I'm pretty sure if you went to Dubai, you'll be fine, right? But if you go into like if you go to Medina, maybe you won't be as fine. Right? Medina is a bit more radical. It depends where you go and where you don't go.
Okay, all right. I think people get it. Yeah.
I don't know how we are on
I think
time.
we digested that.
Yeah, I think you guys got to the heart of that. I don't know how we are on time, but I did have another outsider question for you.
Yeah, so we're disastrous on time, but that's okay. I can't help myself. So let's keep going.
Okay, so this is
Okay.
one that, again, this is super relevant for the people who only read the headlines. So you said that you think that the settlements are what's really making peace impossible. So there's an implication there I want to get into, which is one of the headlines you hear a lot is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So my question for you is, if those settlements went away, would there not still be like popular support for just wiping what current Israel is like off the map and just like having Palestine run all of it? Because to me, that seems like also a pretty unovercomable boundary to peace if one side doesn't want the other side to exist as a nation. So again, this is a headline people. This is the thing that people hear, even the people who don't know.
100%. Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? Because that seems like an issue to me personally.
Yeah. So
Seems like a
look, I thank you for asking it because that's another talking point that drives me crazy. So they say the Palestinians, we can't let them have a state because they hate us. Were they supposed to love you? You've been occupying them for 75 years. Of course they hate you.
Right, but this isn't about justice. This is about now. Like, what do we do from this?
Yeah. But so then you go to point number 2, right? So first of all, saying they hate us, as the other brother explained, yeah, most of the Israelis hate the Palestinians. Does that mean Israel shouldn't exist? No, it's an absurd talking point. But it only makes sense when you think dirty Muslim terrorists trying to kill everyone, they shouldn't be allowed to have a state, right? They're the only people in the world who cannot govern themselves is a deeply racist idea, right? So then if you say, well, they hate us now, and if we give them a state, won't they keep attacking us? Well, then under that logic, you'd never do a peace deal with anyone because you've been fighting this whole time, trying to kill each other, trying to murder each other. No, that's how peace deals work. And in this case, we have a perfect example. Israel did a peace deal with Egypt. And when they did, both sides hated it. And an Egyptian terrorist killed Anwar al-Sadat for making that peace deal. An Israeli terrorist killed Yitzhak Rabin for trying to make a peace deal with Arafat and the PLO. So But it wasn't
terrorists.
just the terrorists. Both sides thought you cannot trust the other side. Well, those voices were wrong. The peace deal
Okay.
between Israel and Egypt totally worked. They have not fought for decades. Peace deals work. That is the direction we have to go. And then there's the absurdity of the Palestinians theoretically, because they're in the middle of war and occupation, don't want an Israeli state.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a theory, and they have no way of being able to execute that. But Israel actually blocks a Palestinian state. Actually. And then here in America, we're so biased. We're like, can you believe the Palestinians have this hypothetical problem? But brother, for the Palestinians, it isn't a hypothetical problem. Israel is blocking their state. So why isn't Israel 100 times more guilty for doing the thing you're worried the Palestinians would do to Israel?
I think I can actually answer that. I mean, I think the reason why it's bigger in the Western mind, rightly or wrongly, is because on college campuses and on streets and in Times Square and in London, you see big parades with where this is chanted. It makes sense that regardless of the reality over in the faraway Middle East, that this is like a bigger, scary thing in the Western.
Yeah, no,
you teased something earlier that I wanted to ask about real
Can
quick.
I just say real quick on the chance?
Yeah.
Because the West, both the media and the politicians, are so gigantically hypocritical, and I can prove it 100% for everyone listening, no matter what. I mean, I think almost 100%, because they fired those deans, right, in Harvard and Penn, when no one even actually chanted from the river to the sea, but they thought they did not denounce a hypothetical chant enough. Okay, all right, so let's take that standard. Anybody says from the river to the sea, it's genocidal intention, and they should be immediately fired and condemned. Well, Netanyahu, a couple of weeks later, said from the river to the sea. And Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, talks about driving all the Palestinians into the desert and having Israel be from the river to the sea. Yet no one in American government or media has condemned them. No one's been fired. No one thinks it's a big deal because genocide of Palestinians is Tuesday. We've come to accept that as normal because what we've been taught is that they deserve to be genocided. They deserve to be killed. And ironically, the idea is they say, well, all they understand is violence. No, the West, America, and Israel, we're the ones that commit the violence, commit the occupation, commit the bombings, and then blame the Palestinians for it.
Well, let's ask Don. Don, you grew up for some time in Israel, and I know you have family there. Do you remember being taught anything with regards to, that Palestinians deserved to die or deserved to be cleared out? Or
I mean, just for full transparency, when I grew up in Israel, I experienced the Second Intifada growing up. And one of I was never directly taught in school to hate Palestinians. That was never the case. We did learn when we learned about the geography of Israel, right? The West Bank was called not the West Bank; it was called Judea and Samaria, and the map in itself included Gaza and the West Bank. When we learned about the shape of Israel, we didn't learn it like that. We learned it whole. But in school overall, I didn't have that. Most of it was really listening to adults talk, listening to people talk, whether we're at barbecues or we were celebrating holidays or political discussions across the table, because there's always political discussions. And myself, again, there was always a split. I know my uncle, my family always calls him some people in my family call him like a leftist and a Palestinian lover, and other people agree with him. But me sitting around the table, I was very Islamophobic when I first came to the States. I really did have that inside of me. I had a visceral disgust and hatred for anyone who was Palestinian when I was a young kid. That was definitely something that I had to grow out of. And the more I was around other Muslims in public school in the States, that changed, and I saw that within me. So in all transparency, that was my experience. But my experience was also other people who thought the other side and called people that I know or looked up to when I was a young kid, whether it be some rabbi or whatever it is, called him an idiot and a warmonger and a killer or whatever it is. So yeah, I've experienced both of them. I myself, just my upbringing, became very radicalized from, being bomb shelters, having alarms go off, being afraid of my mom riding next to a bus because I was afraid it was going to explode, not wanting to go to the movie theater, or consistently thinking, what if a terrorist comes in? What if an explosion comes in? Where do I run? How do I go? That's things that were always on my mind, and that really made me very resentful and angry at anyone who even appeared Muslim. So that's just the transparency of the situation.
Yeah.
And by the way, when the Palestinians have maps in their schools that says that Israel is theirs, that is often used as evidence that they're genocidal and that they want to wipe Israel from the map. But Israel has maps that call West Bank and Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria, and the West is like, oh yeah, rock and roll, no problem.
No, I mean, I agree with that. That's criticism towards the state of
Yeah,
Israel. That's
I
100,
agree.
and I think that should be fair both ways. I just think
Yeah.
it should be exactly, it should be fair both ways. It's obvious Hamas has genocidal intents. I think
What's
that I wish that the UN, I want to personally empower the UN, the international community, to be able to not only emancipate the Palestinian people from an occupation, but emancipate them from Iranian terrorist backed regimes. I don't want that either.
Well,
For
you
the
guys,
Palestinian people.
I think we've given Mr. Uyghur a good workout here today, so we can maybe bring him back for a round 2 if he's down. This has been a lot of fun, but I think we should
Yeah, I
say
think
so
so
long.
too.
I mean, I have one more if you want a victory lap. I think you might like it.
So let's do this, guys. Let John ask his last question, and then
I like
I
it.
should get to my proposal for a piece that we could actually do, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you, though. I appreciate
You know what's amazing? That was my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Hey, look,
perfect.
keep going.
Because I don't want people to lose hope. So we yell at each other back and forth, and we've got passion on all sides, and it's so hard to understand who's right and what the facts are, etc. But at the end of the day, we've got to get to peace. If we don't get to peace, this is our whole lifetime where these two sides are going to kill each other ad nauseum. It's just, we're all sick of it. And so, look, the idea that you're going to wipe out all of Hamas is laughable. And even the IDF says at best we've got a third of them. So how many more Palestinians are going to kill to get to the other 2/3 when you're most of the time you're not even going in the tunnels? That's where Hamas is. So they're barely trying. So that's not the right strategy. But in my opinion, what Israel should do is, and I know that Netanyahu and his right-wing government is never going to do this. So they have to call an election and they've got to get new leadership. And I understand how difficult that is. But the bottom line is at some point, and I would hope as quickly as possible, the Israeli government should do a peace deal with Mahmoud Abbas. Then people say Mahmoud Abbas doesn't have credibility because he's basically been working with the Israelis to help occupy the West Bank, etc. But then you can't say he's not a partner for peace. You can't have it both ways. So then at a bare minimum, Abbas is clearly a partner for peace. He does not have enough credibility with Palestinians now, but if he were to actually execute the two-state solution and get the Palestinians a state, then he would have enough credibility to bring the Palestinian Authority down to Gaza and drive out Hamas so that it is organic. You get rid of Hamas, you get a two-state solution. And then, by the way, the whole point of Israel was to be a safe haven for Jews who have been abused throughout history. And look at what Don said. His whole life growing up, he never felt safe. He never felt like his mom was safe. And as long as you continue the occupation, it is obvious that you're never going to feel safe. At no point would any set of human beings, including the Palestinians, bow their heads and say, "We are fully defeated. Do anything you want to us. We are now will be agree to be oppressed for the rest of our lives." No, everyone in any ethnicity is going to fight back. That way, you're never going to have peace and security unless you do a two-state solution. And again, peace deals work. Israel and Egypt, they made a peace deal. They were the worst of enemies. Egypt led the Arab armies against Israel, but the peace deal worked. The Palestinians and Israelis can do one with the Palestinian Authority, and they must. Otherwise, we're never going to end this conflict. So for God's sake, get to that deal as soon as possible so that the two sides can stop killing each other.
Thanks for joining us, Cenk. Really appreciate it, and good luck out there on the trail.
I appreciate you guys, and genuine, real questions, honest, and it's a good conversation. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, Scott. Yeah. So what did you guys think? Don, that was very, very well done. Good faith, helpful, but I think you got your licks in, and so did Cenk. How do you feel?
I think overall, while obviously I disagree with him on most of that, I think that he was fair and he was honest, even though I didn't agree with lots of what he said. He was fair and he was honest. I think he the way he talks about the settlers, the other human beings, actual human beings who are just trying to live their life as evil thugs, reminds me of the way Republicans talk about Mexicans coming over the border.
Exactly,
People just
Don.
wanting
I literally almost went there with the Mexicans and the border. Like that's exactly where my mind went when I was hearing that rhetoric. But we ran out of time, but we could go on for hours with Cenk.
hours.
I
And I think that also he wasn't nuanced enough about intent. He kind of was just making these equivocations without talking about differences. Hamas is democratic. Hamas is not democratic. Israel is democratic. Israel seems to have a targeted operation. Other like that. It's almost like these necessary conditions, while exist, aren't sufficient to call something genocide. And I didn't really feel like he contended with that enough. But I was surprised for him to say, you know something, I'll go back and revise that tweet. I found that nice.
Look, that was a big thing for me. When I look at someone who wants to be a leader, especially a leader of a nation, I want to know that they're willing to go back and look at where they might have made mistakes. And how do you think Donald Trump would have responded to a challenge like I made to him about one of his tweets? Trump, there's no fucking way Trump would have been like, oh, let me go back and see if I can add something there or see where I might have been wrong. And I appreciate that about Cenk's response tonight.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to show that when we have a good faith conversation, we were actually able to get to a point where, I don't know, my camera is doing this. Just ignore it. It's going to come back online. Whatever's happening is happening. That
we can still hear you.
Yeah, I know you can hear me. It's gonna come back. I don't know what's happening. My camera's being weird today. But that when he was challenged and we were able to get the brass to the taxa thing, and a lot of times he said, I don't care. This is my opinion. And that's fine. We got there. We got to them, but it didn't get there with yelling. It didn't get there with disagreement. I think we got there. And in a sense, I believe kind of exposed a lot of what I see as very light or bias or bigotry against a group of people. And I think that's fine. For me, I think that was we got to the meat of the conversation.
Yeah.
Which
and
was
John, what do you?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple things I noticed. The first thing I noticed was the one that stood out to me is he was talking about how the Israelis actually blew up all the peace deals, and he noted that they wouldn't get rid of the settlements. And I think saying they're the ones who blew it up is a misleading framing. So that's number one. But the second thing I noticed is that this is something Cenk does, is that he assumes motive quite a lot. And I don't think that he looks at it at assumption. But again, with the settlers, the religious zealotry, he said the same thing about the Supreme Court when they overturned Roe. He said that there were religious zealots, 5 religious zealots on the court, and that's why, even though you can make a perfectly secular legal case. He said something that it's a deeply racist assumption to say that Palestine can't govern itself. And while I don't think that claim is correct, you can have other motives for thinking that other than race. You can history, the fact that terrorist regimes are installed in a cycle. So he does this thing quite a bit where he kind of assumes motive in a way that I don't think is great. But other than that, I was happily surprised by how good faith and he was. And again, those when you pushed him on those things, Don, he was actually pretty reasonable. Now you can't push him on literally every single example.
Of course not.
Other than that,
of course.
Yeah,
we did get an of course though.
I was very charming. I liked that. I enjoyed this more than I thought I was going to. So overall.
But I think that this is something that if he's still listening, Shanghai, I think that you should go back and really examine any claim you have if you think it's above falsifiability. If you really think that every claim is above falsifiability, it's a bit much. I'm a Gnostic atheist when it comes to the Abrahamic God. But if you ask me what would falsify that claim, I could absolutely answer it for you, no problem.
What would it be?
Oh, I mean, first of all, direct revelation would be one of them. That'd be an easy one to say. Direct revelation would change my mind. If I truly believe that a direct revelation,
a white robe floated in front of you.
Not even that. It would have to be some time machine, or God speaks to me and lifts me up, and 3,000 people see it, and it's I am God of Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob. And even though it might be aliens, I would probably still believe. I can't shake the fact that I'd believe.
I'm very agnostic about that claim, where I don't know what it would take. But I give the Dillahunty answer that, I don't know what it would take, but surely a God would know. and
Let's find a way.
Well,
they
you're
would-
making, but that's not a Gnostic point of view, right? That's the absence of a belief.
I'm saying my knowledge perspective, like I don't know what it would take. So that is my knowledge perspective. But I currently don't believe any propositions that people say, like if God reached down from the sky and said, "Hey, it's me," like, I'm probably smoke something bad, right?
That's what I'm saying. It has to be like
Or
a combined
good.
revelation with like
You gotta
3,000
get a
people,
blood- you gotta get
agreeing
blood
with
work
me.
done at the same time to ensure that you're not tripping. Yeah. But no, great conversation overall.
Yeah, great stuff, guys.
I do want to remind everyone watching, if you like this conversation, press the like button, ring that bell notification, subscribe, leave a comment. It really helps us out in the algorithm. I also want to let you know that after the show, we are going to go hang out in the Discord. John might show up later. He's busy. He's more busy than all of us,
Very
college
true.
and everything right now. But I'm going to be there. Travis, are you going to be in the Discord?
Yes, I will. I'll be popping on for sure. I'm going to give them.
Yeah, so we're
link.
going to post a link. Come join our Discord. We have a great conversation there. Again, the same rule applies there as applies here. Helpful, good faith conversations. That's the point. We're not, if you start trying to gotcha people, that's just not the space for it. We're not interested in that. The whole point is to foster good conversation. I also want to remind everyone that Travis has an event coming on. Lawrence Krauss, Dinesh D'Souza, Alex O'Connor. Go to your Pang-Burn, www.pang-burn.com, right?
Yep.
.com. Okay, my brain is looping around.
June 1st, everyone. It's going to be big. The topic is the Bible true? This is going to be in New York City. There is going to be a live stream available, but there's nothing like being there in the house during a Pangburn event. So make sure you guys, try to check that out if you're in the area. But yeah, go to pang-burn.com for more information.
Meet us.
And join us on Discord so we can have good conversations. Yeah, we're going to be there, so you can meet us and hang out. Just don't be too creepy. Really yeah, it's really what it is.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna finish up the show. We're gonna air an ad, and we're gonna go ahead and finish up tonight. So everyone, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure, and we'll see you all around next week, same time, Sunday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And as always, stay thinking and good, helpful conversations with good faith. Peace out, everyone.
Thank you. All right, folks, Trav here. I have produced legendary conversations all around the globe: Canada, US, United Kingdom, Australia. And after a long night of discussions, I want to sit down and catch up on some cool intellectual content. But now that I'm in a new country, Netflix says, "Oh, I'm sorry, this content is no longer available." Enter Private Internet Access VPN, my intellectual companion. Private Internet Access VPN service is not just about unlocking Netflix or Disney Plus content. It's about unlocking a whole new world of intellectual exploration. Click connect, and suddenly you have access to a conversation from the other side of the globe that you never even knew existed. This sponsorship with Private Internet Access VPN is about all of us in this community. It is going to allow us to produce more legendary events that will last for years to come. With over 30 million downloads and a no logs policy that has been proven in a court of law, your intellectual property remains yours. It's not just a VPN, it's your shield against unwanted surveillance. All you need is one VPN subscription to protect all of your devices: Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, you name it. With a mind-boggling Pangburn community discount for 83%, you're only going to be paying $2.03 per month. You also get 4 months free and a 30-day money-back guarantee. All you thinkers, debaters, and knowledge seekers, hit the link below to secure...
I want to talk about a remarkable phenomenon that is going on in Asia and Africa, namely the large-scale conversion of Muslims to Christianity. There was a complaint by a guy on Al Jazeera who said that by his count, 6 million Muslims are converting to Christianity each year.
Christians have been saying two things. Number one, God is eternal. Eternal meaning not living forever on and on and on. Eternal in the sense of outside of time. And this concept of eternity, which seemed from a scientific point of view incoherent, now makes complete sense. If God is outside the universe, he's outside of time.
Far from being unable to escape God, there is a very real contingent of non-believers, and I would count myself among their number, who are unable by any means to discover him, who seek and do not find, who knock and receive, as it were, no answer. I think it would be great if God existed. I really do. I would absolutely love to escape death. I would relish being the recipient of unconditional love. Less selfishly, I would love to be able to worship that which deserves to be worshipped. I just don't think it's true. Now, try as I might, look where I can, I find no response, no hint, nothing.